I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Project Recovery, a weekly podcast about addiction and, well, recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great.
Getting ready to kick off part 2 of Lisa's story.
She has been so great to talk with, and her story is very, very compelling.
Now, when the mics were off, you said something interesting to Lisa. You said the sharing of certain details does what?
So it's very therapeutic. As a therapist, I speak to people in therapy every day, and one of the things that's part of the therapeutic process is talking about in an honest way what's happening in your life to the therapist. But I found years ago, the first time I ever did radio, that when I would share some of those things on the radio that people go through, others would I was so overwhelmed with the response, people saying, oh, I didn't know anybody else went through that. And so this is like giving that part of therapy to all the listeners, because there are going to be people listening to Lisa's story and they're going to relate. They may not have gone through exactly what she's gone through, but by people being willing to talk about these personal issues in their life, it's therapeutic for all of us, and I believe really inspiring to help people change. So that's part of that therapeutic process. We change through sharing and connecting with other people.
That's why these stories are so important, and I've said it in my addiction. You know, for the longest time, I would sit on my back deck and I would drink beer, and I would think I was broken.
The only person.
I was the only person. Right? I was like, because all my friends seemed to drink like gentlemen, or seemed to be able to function, right. Seemed to put it all together.
And those really personal experiences that are traumatic or embarrassing or humiliating, those things that we go through in silence and on our own, when we share them with other people, that connection inspires and motivates people to be a better person. If you had known years ago, if you had been able to talk more about it, it might have been a different outcome for you.
But sometimes you're afraid to share those things for people to treat you different. You don't know what they're going to say. It's just the unknown that really scares you from opening your mouth.
And I think Lisa took that to another level when she talked about it was hard to forgive herself for some of those things. So I think a lot of times we don't want to share our story with other people because we haven't really forgiven ourselves for some of the mistakes or problems that we've created in our life.
Well, let's bring back Lisa into the conversation. Now, in the first episode, Lisa talked about her bout with alcohol. Started drinking when she was 19, sobered up around 38.
37, 38.
37, and started to work in the recovery community, worked at some centers, worked with some AAs, meetings, had some sponsors, and then you got divorced, and you said right after you got divorced, you went and picked up husband number 2 at a treatment center? Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
And so how does that happen?
Husband number 1 at the bar.
Yeah.
Husband number 2. Are you
online on the world's
dating,
worst dating site?
Is that?
I have a sick picker.
Your picker's broken.
It's sick. But
okay, so walk me through it. How are you in the treatment center? How do you know this guy?
Well, actually, I was like 8-9 months sober. It was Father's Day breakfast, and so it's a yearly event that they have up at Valley Camp, and so I went with my girlfriends, and of course he's sitting there handsome as ever, and my girlfriend's like, "Ooh, he's kind of handsome." I said, "I'm just going to go socialize."
Now, is he in the treatment center, or does he work for the treatment center?
No, he's there as a resident.
Okay.
And I went over and I sat myself down, introduced myself, and it was on. You know.
Now, before we get any further into that,
I've never been. She elbowed a lady out of the way at the bar and got husband number 1.
Right.
And then number 2, she just sat down. She's got something that we don't have.
She's got charisma.
There it is.
Yeah.
That's it.
So they say, and one of the things when I was in the Pinnacle Recovery Center, they say, you guys are going to be giving up alcohol, pills, meth, whatever you're giving up. Don't fill it with love inside these walls because it's a temporary fix. They say it's bad for people in rehab to get together. They suggest waiting a year because you really got to get to know yourself, your new lifestyle, and do all this. Yep. And so this, you've been through this, and you go sit down to Handsome Guy, and next thing you know, it's on.
It is. And, there's always that 13th stepping stigma, but we clicked.
For those who don't know, what is the 13th step?
That is where two new people in recovery hook up and start a relationship, which is not
a good
to be
idea.
done at all.
Yeah. Matt, why is it bad?
Well, I think you said it well. You are trying to completely change your life. In a therapeutic way, we're trying to change heavily ingrained patterns of behavior and thinking that are leading you to addiction. You're trying to become a stable person and bringing somebody else. A relationship, if you have a really healthy relationship, you're giving a lot. And at that time, especially for that first year, you don't have a lot to give to other people, I think, as you're getting yourself healthy, stable, and retraining patterns of thinking. We could get nerdy for a minute. We won't. But you're changing neural pathways. You're literally rewiring your brain during that year. And so getting into a relationship at all can be very problematic. But getting into a relationship with someone else who's doing the same thing, hopefully, is even worse because you don't have much to give to each other and you can kind of tend to pull each other down.
But we're not saying it's impossible because right now my girlfriend's listening to this. You know what I mean?
Well, she's not in recovery, though.
Yeah. Right. But the other thing is...
And you were dating before.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring this up, though, is that a lot of times two addicts get together and I will put my sobriety on you and you'll put your sobriety on me. And so, it
crumbles that foundation that you're trying to stabilize.
Because one thing that I've learned, and once again, I've only been to rehab once, and this is my first run and hopefully my last, is that you can only do it for yourself.
It has to be for you. You can't be putting it on somebody else to be responsible for you. And that's the whole problem with any sort of behavior change, whatever it happens to be. If you are making somebody else responsible for your behavior change, you're going to fail. And that's why two people who are in recovery should probably not try to date and put that on each other.
That's why when we were in the rehab center, if somebody came in and they were really disruptive or against the program and stuff like that, they didn't want them in there because it spreads like a cancer.
Sure.
Because everybody's so vulnerable at that. And one little hiccup can take down a whole house. And it's been done before.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's the people who run successful programs know very well that they're monitoring the influence that each patron has on each other throughout the whole process.
All right, we're going to get back to Lisa's story. So, Lisa, you meet Handsome up at a treatment center, and you said as soon as you sat down next to him, it was on.
Well, he left the treatment center, came back down to Ogden, and we started our relationship. We started going to meetings. We were doing recovery.
Did he leave with a graduation diploma, or did he leave early?
He left early, yeah.
Against medical advice is what they call it.
AMA.
Well, probably. But, yeah, he'd been there.
Was that a red flag to you at all?
No.
No, okay. He was too handsome. You missed the red flag.
Yes,
okay.
You couldn't see the red flags. Do you see his eyes?
They were
dreamy.
Baby blue.
Exactly. Mr. Bad Boy.
Yeah. But you did say he was a bad boy, and you were attracted to that.
Yes, definitely. But he had an absolute kind heart, and he was a good guy. He would give the shirt off of his back, and he had a sense of humor. He just had the disease of addiction. And so over the course of our relationship, he had been to prison for drugs and alcohol. And so he would violate his parole or probation, by not being clean when he'd go into UA. So out of that 13-year, 10-year marriage and 13-year relationship, he was incarcerated for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
So even though I was with him and married, I was alone a lot of the time. When he would go back to prison, it was like it would be a learning. Lisa and Nick got separated, You know, there's that learning period for one another. And then he'd get out, I'd pick him up, and we'd get together. I always had a car, I had an apartment, I worked, and then we would start using.
And what was his drug of choice?
His drug of choice was heroin and crystal meth.
So just so we can let the listeners know, you battled alcoholism in your 20s and 30s,
Yes.
sobered up, had about a 3-year run of sobriety, and then met Nick, and then decided, I'm 40 years old, I'm going to try what?
Crystal first.
Crystal meth.
Yes.
And how does someone...
That's unusual.
Yeah, at 40, you know what I mean? You feel like you've missed the window. And
That never crossed my mind because I was doing what I wanted. And nobody was going to tell me what I couldn't or couldn't do.
You think that attitude had a lot to do with it?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that has to resonate with a lot of addicts out there. Is who are you to tell me what I can do with my body?
It's an oppositional attitude. When somebody offers you some good advice, but you push it away because you don't want to be told what to do.
Exactly.
So you tried crystal meth, and how long did you stay with crystal meth?
Well, actually, throughout that whole period of time, would vacillate back and forth between that and heroin. It all depended on how much money we had. If he was in prison, or in jail, I would do crystal. When he got out, then that was his drug of choice. We lived homeless, off and on for 10 years. He would try to hold a job. He was a mason by trade, very good at it, but his job was corporate America, and we would go and we would boost.
What does that mean for the listeners?
We would steal.
So he's there working.
That's his job, is stealing,
Yeah.
And from Lowe's and Home Depot and all of those big places every single day to
Get a
take care
fix.
of for our habit. And it was anywhere between $100 and $140 a day just for the drugs.
So, because mine was Bud Light. That's what I knew. How much is $140 worth of drugs? I guess.
So balloons of heroin were at the time were selling for $10 a balloon. So anywhere between 10 and 14 balloons a day.
Wow.
And that's a lot of drugs. Then we had to pay for gas in the vehicle, maybe $1 hamburger at McDonald's or
So you weren't eating much.
No.
You were putting all your money towards the habit.
And then getting hotel rooms.
Okay, so you're mostly homeless at this time.
Or we would stay at his mom's. She would take us in and let us clean up for a while.
You mentioned when you were drinking heavily that you would have withdrawal symptoms every day. Did you have anything similar happening if you weren't getting the drugs that you were needing every day?
The crystal meth, I kind of got moody. I would be crying, and not too bad. But from the immediate first time that I tried heroin, it was horrible. It was gross. I hated it. It made me nauseous and sick to my stomach, and all I wanted to do was just lay there and throw up.
At any time during the 10-year span of crystal meth and heroin, did you ever try to get clean, to get sober?
Yes. Usually, he'd go back to prison, and then I would start going to meetings, and I always had one foot in AA, and I always had one foot with him. And so that was the other thing, even though we were, using and doing all of these crazy things, we both had a connection to a higher power. And we talked about those things, and we wanted to get clean and sober. But
all right, we're going to talk more with Lisa in just a second. Stick around. Welcome back to Project Recovery, a weekly podcast about recovery and addiction. We've got Lisa here, who was just talking about her 10-year run with crystal meth and heroin. This is after battling alcohol addiction in her 20s and 30s, and you're on husband number 2, and it's towards the end of your addiction. What's going on with you?
At this point, we are living in a hotel. And he's over at the dope dealers, and the woman that I was living with, or we were staying with, had happened to be a old roommate of mine. And at the time, she was a prostitute, so I was the bodyguard. That Sunday morning happened to be my 50th birthday, and he had gone over to the drug dealer's house, and she and I got into an argument. And at that point, I had enough. Everything I owned were in 18-gallon Rubbermaid containers. I put them on a rolling cart down to the parking lot at the Sportsman's Warehouse on 72nd. Sat there for a few hours in the cold. Walked over to where he was and said, "I'm done. I want to go home." I'd lost the car that had been impounded, and he said, "I'm not going." So I walked back to my belongings, and at that point, I just said, I'm done. And I went in, and I got on the tracks, went to my mother-in-law's, and by that time, she wouldn't open the door. I went over to another friend's house that I had used with, but she allowed me to spend a couple of nights there. I called my daughter, and she came and picked me up and brought me back to Ogden. And that's when I started my recovery process.
And where did you start your recovery process?
Up at the Women's Retreat House. It's at 1794 Lake Street in Ogden. It's a 12-step recovery. They do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Why did you choose that recovery center?
Well, at that point, getting to Ogden, I had no money. And some friends of mine that I had been in contact with knew of the house, and so they were able to get me the funding to go in to stay there.
Now, you're currently battling crystal meth and heroin, but you're going to an AA 12-step. Does that jive? Does that work?
Yes, it works. It doesn't matter for me whether it's alcohol or meth or heroin. Drug's a drug, and my first real addiction is alcohol. And I just applied the 12 steps of AA to my drug addiction. And actually, I apply it to all aspects of my life today.
And so currently, are you running a 12-step program?
I am active in a 12-step program. I have 8 years clean and sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you working with sponsors?
I have sponsees. I do have a sponsor. I've worked with several women, and we have a great group of women, the AA community in Ogden, that are very strong and tight, and we support each other immensely.
What's your life like now, other than the recovery process that you're in? You're benefiting from having a sponsor. You're sponsoring sponsees. But what else are you doing?
I am currently attending Weber State University. I've been going for 6 years.
Should we do it? Weber State.
Weber State. Great. Yeah, Waldo the Wildcat.
Go Wildcat.
And so
that's exciting. Tell us a little bit about
yeah,
that.
How do you go from alcohol abuse and addiction, 20s and 30s, crystal meth and heroin in your 40s, to 50 going, I'm going to go back to school?
Well, I was working temporary, and the supervisor on the job didn't like me, and so he put me on the do not send list. So as I'm laying there going, okay, what am I going to do? I hear, go to school. So I started at the Ogden Weber Applied Technology.
ATC.
And was going to do dental assisting. Didn't want to suck spit for $23,000. So my mentor and teacher said, why don't you go to Weber? So I started with HR and want to be a great, human resources. And as my recovery and my life has opened up and expanded. It's moved into health promotion / human performance with an emphasis on wellness. And I'm going to be life coach certified in December. And I'm going to have my own recovery life coaching business.
That is absolutely amazing, and congratulations. And just to see your story, where it started, the ups and downs, and those downs were pretty low. I mean, you were talking about being a bodyguard for a prostitution. Where are the husbands in this?
They were actually, my first husband succumbed to alcohol addiction October 13th of 2008, and my second husband overdosed February 3rd of 2014.
So you've lost both of your ex-husbands to addiction.
I have.
What's supporting you now? Because what I know is that going to school and going to those classes and taking the tests, that's a lot. That's the grind all the time. What do you say is helping you, support you being clean and sober and doing that sort of mental work every single day to get your degree?
Well, first and foremost is my connection to a higher power. If I don't connect with him on a daily basis, I won't have any of these things that I have. Giving back to the Women's Retreat House, having a relationship with my daughter and my granddaughter, and helping other women. There is life after addiction, and I'm living proof. And I know that there are women out here still suffering that are in far worse situations. But there is light at that tunnel.
And what I wish everybody could see is her positive glow, her energy.
She's
when
radiant.
We met her downstairs before the show, I knew she'd be a great guest because she just kind of exudes. Yeah, it's this positivity. And I assume that was maybe something that was there but got lost all those years. And now I think those of us around you can feel it.
I want to do like this Bill and Ted moment here, like where they go back in time.
We do that a lot.
You know, if Bill and Ted would go back to you in your 40s and say, hey, listen, when you're in your 50s, you're going to graduate college, you're going to become a life coach, what would you have told those guys?
You're probably full of crap.
It would have been hard to believe, but look, here you are and doing so much good for other people. I think that's amazing. One quick question. How do people who don't have the funds, you said you had some people come together and help you get the funding to do the program. Is that a hard thing that you see other women going through right now, trying to find the ability to pay for these programs?
Yes, funding, money. I mean, these treatment facilities are very expensive. The Women's Retreat House is $120 a week. We are nonprofit. There are a group, SJS Foundation, that helps scholarships as well. Some of our residents go to their local religious affiliations, and we run the facility by donations.
Now,
Okay.
My last question, and then we'll wrap it up and get you back to your study. And my recovery center, Pinnacle Recovery Center, was a co-ed recovery center, which brought its own unique, problems and benefits. But is yours? It's strictly women.
It's strictly women.
And do you find that beneficial because then you can be more honest and open, or what do you think? Why?
I think it's a place where we find our connection to a higher power, and I think if there are co-ed, the connections are higher.
You might
powers.
run into a bad boy.
Exactly.
Well, the dynamic's different, and
Yeah.
I think women can relate to each other in a way that is unique to the woman's needs. You have been married, you're a mother, you're a grandmother, all those sorts of things. You can relate to each other, and without us guys getting in the way.
Exactly.
All right, we want to leave with one positive point. What would you say to the women out there that might be suffering with addiction right now?
Just please reach out. Call somebody. Call the hotline. You can even drop me a line at my new email, stepoutofthedarkness2@gmail.com. You can certainly call the Women's Retreat House, or we do have a website, thewomensretreathouse.com.
And so not having finances to do this isn't a good excuse to say, I'm not going to look into it, because there are scholarships. There are ways, if a woman will reach out and talk with you or someone at the Women's Retreat House, they might be able to find a way to get clean and sober.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
Lisa, God bless you, and congratulations on all your success.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey, thank you for listening to Project Recovery. Tell your friends, give us a rating, hit the subscribe button. Thanks to Dr. Matt, thanks to Lisa, our producer John. I've had 5 Slim Jims before 11 Smith, and everyone at KSL for putting this out there. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.